Streaming up. Hey, Shripad.
Hey, Brandon. Hi, everyone.
All right, we give it a couple more minutes. Let people trickle in. Yeah, Millie. Oh. Oh, you have a meeting? Okay, sorry.
Hey.
I'm getting kicked out of my room, so I gotta another place 1 second. Sorry. Plotting.
Everyone got their travel booked for Valencia? I got mine done. Luckily for me, it's a travel it's a kind of holiday destination from some parts of the UK. So there's cheap tourist flights. Yay for cheap airports. So my entire flight's less than £100.
Damn.
Thanks to Ryanair. Not the nicest people to fly with in the world, but they do get you there cheaply.
I booked a couple weeks ago and I was able to figure out a way to actually get air all the way to Valencia, even though the flights were filling up quickly.
Cool.
Everything went crazy. As soon as CFP announcements came out, everything booked up on the connectors.
Yeah, I'm driving, I have to drive like 2 and a bit hours, but I get to an airport that's a direct flight, so that's better. No going via London.
Yeah, I'm fortunate. Dallas, Fort Worth, where I am, we have a nonstop to Madrid. So I can
That's
just
good.
hop there, and I could have taken a train, but I went ahead and I'm spending like 5 hours in the airport on the outbound, but that's okay.
Yeah. It's not too bad.
Right, can folks hear me?
Yeah, it's hard to hear you, Brandon.
Okay. Hopefully it's not too noisy. I didn't sound well. Enough.
Still getting choppy. Hey, Brandon.
Okay. All right, cool. So I think we have forums, and if it gets too noisy, anyone wants to kind of take over talking, I'd be more than happy to. So just quick, going through the motion, you know, this is being live streamed. Is this better?
Much better.
Okay. I just put my mic to my mouth right now. So as the usual, this meeting is being live streamed. We follow the CNCF and Tax Security Code of Conduct. We would like help with scribing. If anyone wants to help scribe, please put in your name in the meeting notes that I'm going to link here right now. Cool. So today is a working session. I'm gonna go through the agenda. We are going to go through check-ins, and then we have 2 kind of topics for discussion. One of it is the Global Security Vulnerability Summit that Emily and I have been working on with OpenSSF and Linux Foundation. We're gonna get some updates on that and talk about some discussion points. As well as if we have some time, the topic of kind of emergency patching or vulnerable patching came up, one of the supply chain calls. So we can chat about that at the time as well. Cool. If not, I think let's go ahead with the agenda. Do we have any new members today? It doesn't look like we do. So let me just take a look here. No. All right, let's go right ahead into project updates then. So project updates, going to the list. It looks like there may be some updates by members, but I'll get back to that. So do we have any folks on the call that want to give an update from the different working groups?
Nothing for me on the NIST and IEEE front.
Michael, do you want to give a quick update from the supply chain working group, share a little bit of the thoughts that we went
Sure.
through during the last meeting? Awesome.
Sure. Yeah. So as a reminder, the reference architecture is out, being reviewed by the talk, Justin. We beyond that have begun to just sort of talk through next steps of things that we might want to do. And so just to quickly, some of those ideas that were brought up, if I just pull this up here. So for sort of next things we might want to work on, looking at, CNCF projects themselves, either as, a survey or sort of audit of their current sort of supply chain security, where they might need to work on stuff like that. Does it make sense to start to look at, what if there's an example project that exists under the CNCF that can maybe start to apply some secure software factory reference architecture sorts of stuff in there to help their supply chain security. Looking at, how does the CNCF map to SSDF and the executive order, if there's any projects and not on that end. And there's, a few other things as well, where are maybe gaps today, where there's some big gaps in the reference architecture today, things like, I know one of the big ones was runtime visibility. And, is there anything that the group can do to sort of figure out ways to solve some of those problems? What else? Things around, we also discussed some stuff around patching, and one of the other ones is SBOMs. Hey, it's the hot topic, and we haven't really discussed too much of it in a lot of our meetings, more focused on the reference architecture around stuff like integrating with Salsa, Provenance, etc. But does it make sense to start thinking about how the CNCF can better leverage SBOMs? So as a reminder, though, that meeting is tomorrow. So if other folks we're probably going to have a couple more meetings where we sort of talk through some of these things and start to focus on what and discuss what we want to focus on in the coming weeks and months.
Awesome, thanks, Michael. Yeah, we are still kind of like forming that up. We have a couple ideas. If you can't make it to the meeting, we do have a thread that's running on the supply chain working group. So if my Zoom disconnected, so if someone wants to link to that Zoom channel in the chat, that'd be awesome. But yeah, I think wanted to open it up to folks on the call. Just any thoughts, any ideas, things that you're thinking about with supply chain that you think may be good discussion points.
Looks like Brendan disconnected.
Oh, can you not?
Oh, wait. Oh, no, you're back.
Okay.
Oh, well,
okay.
sorry.
I think my mic was not. Yeah, sorry. Forgot about that. So yeah, I don't know how much you caught, but basically wanted to open it up to folks on the call. Even if you can't make it for the meeting, let's talk a little bit about what are some things that we may want to may want to look at. What are some of the pain points or asks that people are getting today?
And I linked the working group notes in the Zoom chat here.
Cool. If everyone seems to have solved supply chain problems, then we can move on. But if not, yeah, the doc is open. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just being amused at your comment.
All right, so let's go through. We have serverless and controls. John, do you want to talk through controls? I know there was some progress made there.
Sure. Yeah, so at this point, all of the sections for controls have been assigned. At this point, we're just kind of working to wrap up those last few controls and cross mappings to 853 R5. And then we should be in good shape to push forward to complete phase one of this work, which is really, as a reminder, just an index of the Cloud Native Security White Paper V1 and the Software Supply Chain V1 white paper. We have a meeting tonight at 6 p.m. Eastern if you're interested in talking about that more. We meet bi-weekly. Other than that, that's pretty much it.
Awesome. And I think this is one of the things that we probably want to also showcase at the upcoming KubeCon. So I think let's possibly leave like 1-2 weeks for review and for comments. So if I think it would be ideal if we can have a content complete controls catalog by maybe 2 weeks time, the week of the 13th. And then we can kind of help beautify it and write a blog post and things like that as well.
Yeah, one of our current constraints is we have some work allocated to different members of the working group that seem to have gotten their work reprioritized. So I've reached out to them to try to reallocate those. And when I get confirmation, if I can, otherwise I'm going to just cut things over, reassign some of the sections and get them wrapped up. So shouldn't be a big issue there, but I do want to give them enough time to be able to respond.
Yeah.
So on serverless, I can give the status. The paper had been sent out for review and some comments are there. We need to address those comments. I just pinged Andrew. We're going to meet later this week to see how quickly we can address those and then have a date for publishing. Thank you.
Thanks for right now. Okay. And let me just check through. I can't see who else is on the call right now. So, but based on the list, it doesn't look like we have anyone else from the different groups. Going through the member list, no updates from folks, so we should be good. Yeah, so I think we'll move on to the topics for discussion today. So the first one we had is Global Security Vulnerability Summit. So this is something that Emily and I have been working on. So let me share a little bit, and then Emily can chime in on some additions. So this is something that issue was created. Emily created this, I think, close to the end of the year last year, the start of this year. And the idea was kind of to fix some of the problems in CVEs and some items not being able to be represented as CVEs, or some items that some groups having difficulty in the CVE process. And one of the team members, CSA in this space, is working on GSD. I can't remember the acronym. Global Security Database, I'm guessing. And the idea there is to kind of have open source database of the different vulnerabilities. And so the idea of the summit is really to bring folks together to talk about the different vulnerability problems, the different supply chain and SBOM problems that go into how do you do vulnerability management, what are some things that could be automated, what are things that could be made more machine readable and automated within the process. So this event has been published, and the CFP for it closes. The CFP of it closes this Friday. If someone can link that, I unfortunately can't access Zoom.
Already linked in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, and I think also just maybe Emily, do you want to chime in on anything?
Yeah, so we met with CSA end of last year to kind of talk through some overlaps within the work of this group as well as CSA's working groups. Huge shout out to Aradna for coordinating that discussion and ensuring that we had those lines of communications. In the course of that, they made us aware about GSD and some of the general vulnerability problems that they've been seeing and experiencing. So a little bit more detailed recap on that is that CFV or CVE today, as it is currently set up, is designed around software products that you can generally purchase and use. It's not designed for cloud services or any kind of SaaS software offering that's available. And there are a lot of other logistical problems. And what we've been finding over the course of the decades that we've had CVE is that we're getting more and more information about vulnerabilities through social media and through mailing lists than we are actually in the CVE itself. And updating a CVE, as we saw with Log4j, is incredibly difficult and takes time and a massive Herculean amount of coordination amongst both the reporter as well as the CVE organization to ensure it's up to date. And it is error prone. It's an error prone process. There were issues around Log4j that kind of brought a lot more of this to light. And there also isn't a centralized location for security researchers to kind of pen and discuss their notes about vulnerabilities as they're discovered. Further, on top of that, while there is a reservation schema in place for CVEs, for things that are suspected security issues, such as is common with the Linux kernel, there isn't a way to centralize the reporting of those. So GSD is really a database that's designed or going to be designed to help solve some of these problems, but there are a lot of other systemic issues within the vulnerability management ecosystem and reporting ecosystem that really need to be addressed and fleshed out. We've gotten really far in machine learning and AI, and potentially we could take a lot of those skill sets once we have a better centralization of vulnerabilities and enrich vulnerability information that's being reported by security researchers, by companies, by individuals and organizations. That way we can learn more about common patterns instead of doing bespoke analysis of all of these things and repeating a lot of the same reports over and over again. So a lot of it is around discoverability and solving some of these harder challenges in this space. So there will be some curated talks from individuals that are key players that we know about work that they're doing, but we've also reached out to the community in the form of the CFP, which closes the end of this week, to kind of solicit any ideas and growing areas for either vulnerability reporting. There's a whole slew of stuff on the webpage, which is linked in chat, such as operationalizing policy, scaling the identifier ecosystem, what gaps currently exist, how does scoring work. There's some new scoring mechanisms on the horizon, which are incredibly useful. So there's a lot of things going on about this. The event is designed to be hybrid with a key focus on virtual participation as an equal citizen to in-person. That's been especially important for us, especially given what's currently going on with Texas, and as well as that there's a lot of distributed folks around the world that would not be able to make it in such a short amount of time. So we want to make sure that everybody has access to any kind of ad hoc hallway track sessions, any of those kinds of things. I think I covered it all.
Thanks, Emily. Any thoughts, any ideas that folks want to see, what are the pain points that like people are looking at, so we can get some ideas on the topics that we can curate.
Definitely, there's some of the stuff I've seen. There's a couple of ones I've come across. One is vendors who don't issue CVEs. IBM mainframe is a good one. They have a company policy not to issue them, so there's no CVEs in mainframes. The other one is where an underlying library says they don't want a CVE against their library. The example I had was a Kubernetes vulnerability. It was a YAML DOS. It was from a library, but the CVE was only ever issued against Kubernetes. So then other projects that used that library used the Kubernetes CVE, which makes no sense whatsoever. But that was because the library owner says, I'm working to the spec. It's the spec that's wrong. It's not my problem. So that kind of thing was definitely, and negotiating that was not simple. So having more opportunities to have somewhere that's neutral, that you can say this is a security issue and it's going to get recorded somewhere, even if the vendor or owner doesn't necessarily agree, would be useful.
Gotcha, and I think also one of the idea that is also to have the CV, like the advisory, is also be traceable to where actionable steps can be taken.
Yeah, that'd be useful. And the other option, the other one I've been doing a lot of stuff with over the years is scoring. I don't know if this is going to address scoring as well, like severity scoring, because severity scoring is a bit of a nightmare, as I'm sure everyone who's ever dealt with CVSS knows.
What would you say would be a useful metric or useful information that would be consumable besides scoring? Because yeah,
it's a hard problem. It's a problem, but it's a really hard one. The problem is that there's often not a lot of kind of exploitability. It's hard because the analyst who does the work to come up with the score is often completely abstract from the work, how the software is used. They're sitting in a room somewhere. They're not actually someone who uses that package. So they just look at it, for example, cross-site scriptings. I know for a long time, everyone issued them as 4.3 because someone issued a cross-site scripting as 4.3. So everyone said, all right, cross-site scripting, it's 4.3, which anyone who's been a pen tester knows that's not real life. Some cross-site scriptings are irrelevant and some of them are really bad. The tricky part is how do you actually, you could try and take like input from the community and say, is there a route for a community to say, no, this one's worse? And then for some process, just community consensus. I can see that being messy, but for like big vulnerabilities, for smaller ones though, even like letting someone say, hey, this score is wildly different and feed that in. And if enough people say this is wildly different, we go, okay, it's obvious the community thinks this is worse than the vendor may have thought, or the person scoring it originally may have thought. But tricky problem.
Right, yeah.
I joined the last GSD meeting and they did talk a little bit about lowering the priority, the emphasis on like a single scoring metric, and instead kind of providing more context around maybe not even vulnerabilities, but generalizing them to findings or something similar. I'm going to link the issue that was opened as a result of that conversation, if anyone wants to add their thoughts in there.
Awesome. And then someone can copy that into the meeting notes, that'd be useful as well. Sorry, go ahead.
One other, and this is kind of heretical, I know, is I actually don't like metrified scoring. And I'll explain why. Because CVSS scoring is ultimately a guess times a guess times a guess times a guess. And then it's given a very precise sounding number. And non-expert users think that means there's science that's reproducible behind that number. Because if I see something like 3.45, I assume that's a scientific formula wrongly. Because if anyone who's actually analyzed CVSS knows that's not how it works. But I think there's an element where if you were giving people high, medium, low, they know it's fuzzy. Like they know that that's not necessarily 100% precise. But if you see numbers, people, I think, who are not in the security industry tend to assume it's it's a precise for a reason. If you say something point something, sounds precise, right? But I know that's a bit heretical as a concept.
Yeah, I think there's also like an interesting, I was looking at the back the Vex draft as well, and I think there's like some interesting ideas in being able to articulate whether how severe it is unknown. I think that they have to be like whether it's affected, not affected, fixed, or under investigation. I think that's like having that kind of scale is helpful.
I think Vex is a really interesting idea. I'd like to see how well it work. How like will people do it? I know I'm sure they will for like some vulnerabilities, and guess maybe that's what all you can expect. But I'm not sure that every person finding a vuln will be able to do that. But I think even if it's done for just the high profile ones, it would be a win.
Cool. Yeah, that was good discussions. Any other thoughts? If not, we will move on to next discussion topic.
Yeah, there were some thoughts we were wondering, I think last year around context-aware risk scoring for vulnerabilities, right? So when CV comes, it has CVSS, which says it has a network vector, and the authorization vector, which vector the vulnerability is exploited. And now if you are running that some application which has that vulnerability and it has a good, let's say some vulnerability has network attack vector, right? But I have good security measures around networking around my application. So I'm probably not affected by that vulnerability as such, right? As much as others. So the CV score essentially is dependent on this context in which you are running your application. So we're basically trying to see how we can model that. So if anyone has any thoughts, and this is a hard problem, right? So that is another interesting thing we are looking into.
All right. Okay, so the last thing that we kind of had on the agenda was a bit more of a discussion topic, but I'd like to open up to the room as well to kind of get any thoughts or any particular security topics that people are kind of working on, or some things that have been bothering them. Just to kind of talk through it, get some ideas. Maybe we can put in people do presentations and talk from there.
Hey, Brandon, I'm not sure I got the scope of the question, but you're putting out to the floor any other topics we might want to bring up?
Yeah, not in the scope of GSVS, but just like kind of like discussions for the group, some ideas where we could potentially, maybe there's something interesting that the tech can do, or maybe we can start get some speakers in to talk about certain topics, or just just banter about security.
Got it. Yeah, so I'll bring something up and I'll keep it short because I'm not sure it'll seem relevant to others, but we ran a tabletop exercise along with a capture the flag event in our collaboration with UConn. We is my day job, Synchrony. And I built a scenario in which the vulnerability appears in a non-scannable part of the stack, which is a DSL associated with SAS. SAS is a analytics tool which has a modeling language kind of built in it. So it's a layer pretty high up in the stack that sits above the compilers and the SAS interpreter and the SAS environment, the SAS environment. And that kind of vulnerabilities and visibility into that sort of risk and part of the software architecture is something that needs to be tackled, I think, at some level. And I think it's what tends to be neglected because it tends to be very product specific. So those things can be ephemeral and therefore not worth tackling. But for things like SAS, that's been around now for decades, probably, maybe it is worth trying to understand the risks associated with that, because those things can migrate through Bitbucket or GitHub, and they're going to pass through the scanners. Everything will look fine. So we postulated a supply chain attack that was achieved by basically importing an update to one of these modeling scripts, which then allowed the attacker to get access into other parts of the environment and basically move laterally to do some damage on the ERP model inside. And it's a bit of a stretch in terms of the tabletop exercise, but I wondered if anybody else had, worried about these DSLs and their visibility for security tools.
Yeah, so I was on the panel just earlier today. I think that was a relevant topic, although I'm not sure whether it's exactly what you're talking about. So I think there was a concern. And this was around like SBOM, right? And being able to account for everything that goes into your software. And then we talked about plugins or certain services that kind of like pull out into the internet to like grab functionality or grab policy and things like that, which is, I think, a little bit orthogonal to what you're talking about, right? And the question is like, should we have an SBOM for like all those things as well? And how should we integrate it? Or it's something that we need to start accounting for.
Yeah, definitely fits in the SBOM problem. It fits in the bill somewhere.
I don't know. Would it be fair to say that the practice should be that it should not reach out and download code, and we should restrict network access to like XYZ?
Yeah, there's no pat answer for this, because you could say you need to red team these tools in order to know where the vulnerabilities are. So it's not just interop with the public internet, but when they get exposed to other tools inside the environment, you don't know what capabilities they have. So, microsegmentation is one way to do it, but for a thing like in the analytics rich environments, people are exporting these models inside things like Jupyter, and so the risk kind of moves along with the data inside the platforms. So it creates challenges there. So I'm not sure how our traditional security tools and layering get employed for those.
So that's actually something that I know we do talk a little bit about in the supply chain security best practices, which is just generally we keep the definition of what a build is very, very broad. And that includes like any of that sort of stuff, whether it's, hey, I'm building infra. Great. You should apply the same sorts of practices. Yada, yada. Hey, I'm building a machine learning model. And in fact, actually, that is a thing that, at least in the finance world, is a very big concern. And they are applying literally the same practices that you would, anything that could run arbitrary code against machine learning models. Now, with that said, I think a lot of the security tools haven't necessarily caught up with being able to kind of like look at what's suspicious in a model.
That makes sense.
Got one other one I would mention just as a thing people might have not have seen too much of, might be of interest. There have been 5 container breakout vulnerabilities in the last 3 months. After years of not being many, there's 3 in the kernel, 1 in containerd, and 1 in cryo. So pretty much guarantee that whatever container stack you're running, you have at least 1 and probably more than 1, up to 4. And some of them are quite fun. The latest one in containerd is triggered by a volume specification in the container image. So there's nothing in the manifest, and there's nothing at the kernel level. If you run a malicious image, then you can copy things like the kubelet key in Kubernetes straight into the container and merrily go on your way, compromising the cluster. So it's interesting because I think a lot of companies have kind of gone down the line of going, well, Docker isolation is good enough, containerd isolation is good enough, but unless they're patching all their clusters a lot and rebooting all their cluster nodes a lot, they're probably not going to have a very robust position right now.
Were there exploits on those, or just
Yeah, Yeah, there's exploits. So Dirty Pipe, well named, the lovely name Dirty Pipe, it's exploitable easily, and someone who does container breakout. The container D one, I proof of concept, it's really easy. That's the other thing. These are kind of easy. They're not like super difficult. Some of them, like the container D one, the cryo one, is incredibly easy. You just concatenate kernel parameters into a Kubernetes manifest, and it will happily execute code on your machine, no problem at all. So yeah, these are actually fairly easy to exploit in a lot of cases. Some of them are blocked by things like, some of them are blocked by seccomp, apart from Kubernetes turns off the Docker seccomp profile. So in Kubernetes, they're exploitable, and in Docker, they're not. So it's just, at the moment, it's kind of an interesting one because there's been a dearth of these for quite a long time. And we've suddenly hit this patch of lots of them. And it seems like a lot of researchers are really hitting the kernel hard. And I've noticed some researchers are doing it because Google will give you $10,000 if you can break out of their KCTF environment, which is a hardened Kubernetes cluster. So there's like a direct financial motivation for get Linux bug, turn into local privilege escalation, turn into container breakout, which seems to be motivating, which is good because we're finding these before attackers are. But it does mean there's a lot of patching. I think people like they aren't doing right now probably need to be.
That's interesting. So is that something that we could do here in terms of like I know I've seen the Twitter chats recently about this container escape stuff.
Yeah.
Would it be useful to set up a boundary program?
I think there's definitely something to be said about, like, I'm not sure that I think that there could be something we could do around advising people on like isolation levels for different workloads. You know, saying here are, because I think a lot of people haven't really got the message that if you want to run really untrusted code, relying on standard containerd/cryo style containers probably isn't a very good idea. And having something to CNCF saying, look, there are things like gvisor and Firecracker. Yeah, sorry, now it's the yes, I think they did. I think it's fully, I'm sure Christoph said it fully popped up. So I think he has actually released, yeah, actually there is a repo for that. Sorry, just asking, there's a Dirty Pipe full exploit. Yes, I think he did. So yeah, I think maybe the only thing I was thinking with CNCF is maybe we want to have something from the CNCF that says, if you are doing these kinds of things, or here are the options available to you, like here's the pros and cons of different container isolation mechanisms generically, and here's where you may or may not want to use those, because I'm not sure there's a lot of like good guidance on that. So for example, CIS benchmarks just don't touch that topic, really. We kind of mention it in passing, but not really much.
I'm kind of curious about the container D one, right? Would it, because that is kind of at the orchestration level, would it, like, even if you use Kata container, for example, would you still be able to activate it?
Yes, you would. Well, that's what the researcher said. The container D one works if you're running gvisor or Firecracker or Kata, because it's container D that copies the files at container launch time. So it's because it has access to the underlying node because it's got to. Yeah, so that was really nasty because it doesn't even that's that sort of thing. It's the fact that there's a vulnerability here that, I mean, I've done a blog, but it's just like a blog on a corporate blog site. There's nothing that maybe comes from the industry to say, hey, I don't know how whether there's anything the CNCF could maybe do there, just like maybe even more awareness about this kind of thing.
Could you share those documents and the blog posts that you're writing on?
Yeah, so I've just been like doing like blogs analyzing them, and because a lot of the time what's happening is the researchers are coming out with a blog, or even they're not even doing that. It's literally just a bug post, and there's no real details. The container one I found randomly because someone mentioned it on Twitter. So I've been writing blogs on them, but I can post those into the chat. There's quite a few because there's been 5.
Would you also? Yeah, I was going to suggest maybe let's create an issue on this. I feel like that is actionable and easy steps that we could do to kind of either bring more awareness of this or create some more incentive into research in this area.
Yeah, I think awareness and a bit of kind of like guidance on, what people could be doing to make these things less bad or less likely. Because definitely if you pump up your seccomp profile in your app armor, you can at least reduce the risks a bit. And it is kind of general across the container space. So So I should get the.
Any other thoughts on this? I can think of like blog posts, bug bounty, yeah, or any other components that we think are important here. Just the, I guess the kubelet may be in scope as well.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So I think that's a good discussion, and I feel like we got something out of it. So let's create that issue, and then we can brainstorm a little bit on the issue to see what are some things we can do, and we can see whether we can make some recommendations to the TOC. Some ideas there.
Oh yeah, I can do an issue on that.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, if not, I don't think we have, I don't want to start like a new topic of discussion. So I will just like go around the room again. Any thoughts? Any questions? If not, I'm gonna just chat a little bit about what's coming up next in the meeting. All right. Going once, going twice. All right. So, a quick update, and then we can end the call. So, as usual, we're doing the check-in meetings every other week. So next week there will be a check-in meeting, mostly going to be focused on triage of our new members. The following week we'll have a presentation. This is something that came out of some work from folks in the Open SSF. The idea here is something called Security Insight Spec. And the hope here is to be able to encode some of the security controls and information about the software repository as a YAML file or something equivalent, so that we can programmatically evaluate what are some of the security controls of a repo. For example, encoding the number of the branch protection policies or number of reviewers required to approve a PR, response times, and things like that. Yeah, so I'm gonna. This is in the schedule. This will happen in 2 weeks on the 13th of April, and then during that meeting also, we are going to talk a little bit more about Cognitive Security Con for next QCon. And that will be the point where we will probably reach out to some folks to kind of get help on the day itself and to be part of the event. Cool. If not, I think that's it for today. Any closing thoughts from anyone? All right. If not, I guess everyone will have another 50 minutes back. Thank you very much.